Welcome to the Gamescape, everybody. My name's Jeric, and today we're back in Chaos Gate Demon Hunters. This is my guide on the Justicar class. This is my fourth guide on the different soldier types. And today we are going to be looking at the Justicar and seeing what he can do for us, kind of how to skill him out, what he's good for, what he's maybe not so great at, and maybe talk a little bit about how to kit him out. But that's going to depend on your build. And your build, as always, is going to depend on your play style. So the Justicar is a very flexible class. It's decent at ranged. It's quite good at melee. It's good at support. And so when you're looking at your Justicar, you kind of have to have in mind what you want him to do, because he's not going to be able to do everything well, right? So as always, usually start off with getting some guidance by maybe seeing what his personal skill is. This particular one happens to have +1 ammo for their equipped grenades, which doesn't help us that much in determining what direction we want to go with him, other than if maybe we do want to carry grenades, that might mean we're not going to be carrying something else like the incense burner for extra willpower or something like that. Or if you happen to have the pre-order items, you might not be carrying the Demonica Libra for the extra critical chance on your melee attacks. So it's up to you. Again, you don't even have to do anything with that. I mean, if you never carried a grenade with this guy in his life, that wouldn't probably be the worst thing in the world. So let's kind of break him down. Let's see what he's good at. First of all, ranged attacks. Let's look at that for a second. He is one of the classes that's able to get into the Psy Cannon. So if we look here, this enables him to use a Psy Cannon along with extra crit percent chance on his ranged attacks and extra crit damage on his ranged attacks. And then he's got a rapid reload ability here that's an auto, 50% chance anytime his ranged weapon runs out of ammunition, he'll just automatically reload without spending the action point. That's a nice ability if you're going to go ranged. So unlike the power armor suits, the Terminator suit, which he can use if you skill him into it, that's here. I would highly recommend you do so, because the Terminator armor, in my opinion, is just superior to the power armor. But he can mount a heavy weapon on his forearm and still carry a melee weapon. So if you get him skilled into the Psy Cannon here, he can still carry that melee weapon with him, and he can still make melee attacks as well as using all of the different things that he can do with the Psy Cannon. So that's going to be a nice step up from what the Purgator can do. Now, he's not going to be as good as using the cannon as the Purgator can be if you skill him out correctly, but it's still another ranged attack that you can get out there, and it's even still another area of effect ranged attack that you can get out there. And so this is a nice thing to skill into if you're going to do it. And if you're not going to do the entire thing, probably you don't want to do any of it. I don't think there's a reason to get the Psy Cannon if you're not going to also get the extra critical damage and the rapid reload. I just think those things just kind of go hand in hand, and that's going to be great. Other side of the house here, we've got melee, and he gets hammer hand just like the interceptor class does, which is the ability to do a critical attack anytime you want by spending the action point in the willpower. It does 4 damage and 100% crit chance for 1 AP, 2 will points. That's upgradable. You can also get it to do bleed, which again, if you've seen my apothecary video, I'm not a big fan of bleed damage. It's just too slow, and the target gets to take their action before they bleed out, if they're going to bleed out. So this one's okay, but you're gonna probably want to take it, because if you're going melee, you're gonna want to get down into this section down here. The other one up here is another crit damage on your melee attacks, so that's fine. Then we got some willpower in here, but down here we get a little bit interesting, because this on your warp charge, or your force strikes rather, for your melee attack, here you gain +1 damage, which is nice. Here and here, each one of those gives you armor break 1 on your force strikes. Now again, armor break I think is superior to armor piercing, and if you've seen some of my other videos, you've heard me say this, but I'm going to say it again just in case you haven't. If you have armor piercing on your attack, that is great for your guy. And if he can't get the job done, though, if he can't kill that target by himself, then his armor piercing doesn't help the rest of the squad. And for the rest of the squad to help out killing that guy, they still have to chew through all of his armor. Armor break, on the other hand, actually reduces that armor almost as extra damage, right? So if you've got 2 armor break and you're doing 4 damage, let's say with your melee weapon, If he's got 2 armor, you're going to actually do 6 points of damage because the armor break happens first. He's going to break 2 armor first, and then he's going to apply his 4 damage points. And so you're gaining damage, and it's getting rid of that armor for the rest of your squad to finish off that guy or do some more work on him or whatever before rather than them having to chew through it if you did your 4 damage just to his body if you had armor piercing. So I think it's superior. I think it's worth taking anytime you can get it, and that's my thoughts on that. Now this one right here is a nice one. This one, anytime your knight crits a target with a melee attack, it has a 50% chance to gain 1 action point automatically. Now again, anytime you can get extra action points for anything, that's a good thing. It's just better, and that includes saving action points too, which is what makes this really good too. I mean, you're not spending that action point to reload your cannon or your bolter or whatever you have. Here you get the extra action point just for getting the crit. That's another swing you can take, whatever you want to do. Now, like the interceptor class, this guy also has the get 2 uses of your auto ability as well. The problem a little bit is that it's a little bit more hidden. This class's skill tree is a little bit weird. Normally they go sideways, then branching up and down. This one doesn't. This one goes up first and then branches sideways. And so if you want to get to this, you have to get into this as well. And we'll talk about that in just 1 second. But I want to finish up with the melee stuff first. The other side of the melee tree here, you get Rend the Unclean, which is a area of effect blast attack centered on your knight, and basically deals damage to all enemies within area 2, does 4 damage, and does knockback on them. Now that can be upgraded to +2 more damage here, and then another +2 damage and +1 blast area on the warp charge. So you're up to 8 damage. I think that scales with your weapon as well. So you're up to 8 damage or better potentially, and you're on an area 3 with knockback, and that's good. So this is a decent ability to skill into too, if you've got the points and you're not focusing on like ranged attacks necessarily, for instance. So support, I mentioned he can do support too. He does ranged, he does melee, he does support. First on the support tree is the Aegis shield buffs. So he can get +1, +2 armor to his Aegis shield, and he can warp charge it for +3 more armor if you take this ability. So you're looking at with Terminator armor, just vanilla Terminator armor, you're looking at 7 armor if you get all 3 of these and warp charge it. Now this center ability here is a little bit interesting, and it allows him to take all of that armor that he has, all 7 of those points, or potentially more if he's got better armor, and transfer it to any other knight or any other knight's armor for 1 turn at any range. So if you've got a knight that's in big trouble, or let's say you've got some kind of setup like let's say you've got a ranged interceptor, he's carrying the silencer. He teleports in to the middle of the enemy. He unleashes his scatter shot from his silencer. Now he's stuck there, right? Now he's just kind of hanging. You can take this, you can put all that armor on him, and so that he can weather the beating that he's about to get, if that's what you need to do. So that's one example of how you might use this. If you need to protect one of your brothers who's just got a bunch of Overwatch shots on him or something, you can also transfer your armor to him. So this is an interesting ability. I haven't played with it very much, but it's concepts, it's got some decent ideas behind it. And then you can come over here into the provoke, and so this is sort of an enemy debuff, I guess you could call it. Basically what provoke does is it inflicts enraged on your target, which causes them to attack the guy who did it in melee. So they're going to come charging at you in melee, which isn't necessarily a bad thing for your Justicar, especially if you do it to some ranged units that aren't necessarily good at melee. So that's one way that you can affect the enemy, kind of force them to not only do what you want, but if you line things up right, you can even force them to charge past your other knights so that they get to take swings at them on their way by. So that's a kind of an interesting way you can do that. This one increases the area of that ability. Right now it's area 2, range 10. So it's not a super long range, but it's an okay range, and it's an okay bubble. This puts it up to area 3. And then this one inflicts crazed instead of enraged on the warp charge. Now the difference is, if they're crazed, there's a chance, it's not 100%, that they will attack their own guys instead of attacking you. So I don't know if that's better, because you kind of lose the enraged effect that you might have been counting on, but it's a warp charge. So if you don't want it, then you don't have to activate the warp charge. And then, like I said, up here, you've got your enduring reflexes. Knight gains +1 use per turn for all of their auto abilities. That just couples really well with both this one and this one down here, where you're getting the extra chances at action points, or you're getting the extra potential to reload. Both of those are really great. And then kind of the last area down here, and I know I'm skipping around a bit, but it's all kind of support stuff. This is one of the best abilities that the Justicar has, and that is Honor the Chapter. What this does is this allows him to choose a knight at any range, and basically you're transferring an action point to them. It costs you 1 action point, 1 will point. They gain an action point. Now, if you're just doing one, that's not necessarily that great, because you're kind of doing it at a net loss, and sometimes it's necessary, right? Sometimes you've got somebody who just needs that extra action point, and so your Justicar can give it to them. So that's fine, but it gets better, because here you can get him another action point. So now you're transferring 2 for the price of 1. Now that's a net gain, although it is costing you willpower to do so. And then if you warp charge it, then you get 2 more on top of that, and you transfer a will point, but the cost is going up here. So now we're looking at 1 action point and 4 will points if you have all 4 of them, but you're going to transfer 4 action points and a will point to the target. So that's a pretty good deal. You're gaining a net +2 or 3 +3 action points, and it's costing you some willpower, but it might be worth it, you know, with what you're doing. This especially could come in handy if you've got somebody who's doing executions and they just need that 1 more swing, for instance, to get everybody else another action point. That could be one case where this would really come into handy. I mean, being able to give action points out to your other knights is very handy in most situations anyway. Now, you do have to be careful how fast you burn through your willpower here, but the fourth thing in this block here, though, is the extra war gear slot for passive equipment. So this, if you pick this up, this allows you to equip any other piece of passive war gear. So it could be the incense burner. If you got the Domina Libra, you could do that. If you've got extra ammo clips, if you got extra armor, whatever, any of the passive gear you can equip in this extra slot, leaving your other slot open for perhaps a grenade. In this guy's case, you know, his normal war gear slot, maybe then once you got this slot, maybe you do carry a grenade around with you so that you've got the benefit of the extra ammo for the grenade. Then the last section over here is kind of another enemy debuff a little bit, and it's kind of a utility as well. So this is Crushing Charge, and you run in a direction up to range 10 to deal 1 point of damage to whoever you run into, and you do 1 stun. But the nice thing about this, number one, it's a fast move for 1 action point and a couple of will points. So you're moving basically 2 action points worth of movement, and you're getting the attack at the end. So that's okay. Now it's only 1 damage, but it's stun, and it can be upgraded for more stun here. And you're also, if you go here, you're inflicting hobbled on them. And so that's going to be a nice thing too, where you can debuff their speed by -2 with your hobbled effect for 2 turns as well. And you're also doing an extra stun, a couple of stun points there. But the nice thing is this makes you immune to hazards and knockback. So what that means is you can run through a burning patch, you can run through a plague patch that one of the plague marines has sprayed out with his plague gun, and you just run right through it and it doesn't affect you. Also, you can run through overwatches. You can run, if you are targeted by a suppression fire, you can go ahead and just run right out of that and no problem. You aren't going to trigger any of those autos, and so that's a really nice thing to be able to do, just to kind of get out of a sticky situation even potentially, and at the end deliver a little bit of a thump to one of the enemies, knock them back a little bit. You know, there's a lot of utility here. The problem is it's kind of far down the tree, and getting out into here isn't necessarily always the direction that you want to build. And so, like I said at the beginning, you gotta decide exactly what you want your Justicar to be able to do, right? If you want him ranged, great, go ranged, maybe pick up a little melee, or maybe pick up Honor the Chapter. If you want him to just be support and not be super great at melee, but be good at helping out, maybe you grab all 4 of these, and maybe you grab all 4 of these, and you know, the easy stuff. You know, you're probably going to want Hammer Hand in almost every case with almost every build, because it's right here, right? Easy to get to, and being able to deliver a crit anytime you want is handy, no matter what the situation is. So I would recommend probably getting Hammerhand in almost every single build you're going to get, unless you very specifically are going for like this part of the tree here, and you wanted both this and this together, then you're going to probably run out of points. And that's going to be an issue for you, right? And that's why you have to decide, because you're not going to have enough points with your Justicar, even at level 9, to build them out to be good at everything, right? You can be really good at melee. You can be pretty good at shooting and kind of good at melee. You can be really good at shooting or really good at melee and be able to do some of this extra support stuff. You can kind of be mediocre at the shooting and melee and be a little bit better at the support stuff, but you're not ever going to be great at all three of them. You just don't have enough points. Now, there are mechanisms where you can do that if you have your Baleful Edict upgraded correctly and the Apothecarian is upgraded to where you can commune with fallen soldiers and pick up more skill points. Then you can absolutely probably build out the entire tree. If you're ruthless enough to kill your own guys off to get the extra points for the living guys, that's kind of up to you. I've always kind of thought that's a weird mechanic to encourage you to purposely kill off some of your knights so that the others get stronger. It seems weird to me, and I don't do it, although it has been suggested to me in the comments that it's a valid tactic, and sure it is. If you want to do that, that's perfectly fine. I don't tend to do that. It doesn't make too much sense in the long term, thinking about, like the long-term lives of the knight beyond the campaign that you're running right now. The chapter has to go through all of the rituals and stuff that it takes to train a Grey Knight to begin with, and finding the right guys and all of the business that goes along with that. If you're familiar with the lore, it's quite a complex process. And so to just kind of throw away knights' lives to make it easier for your existing knights to get a little bit stronger is questionable from at least from a logistics standpoint and a lore perspective, I think. But again, it's a game. Play it how you want it. It doesn't really make any difference. If that's your play style and that's what you want to do, hey, go for it. It's all good with me. All right, let's talk a little bit about gear for this guy. Now, this guy, like I said, you're going to want Terminator armor pretty much immediately with this guy. If he doesn't already have it when you pick him up, probably your first level, you're going to want to skill him into the Terminator armor because it is just better. And having the Terminator armor gives him a lot more survivability. He gets the extra armor and so on. What he's going to want mostly is going to be will points. And I know that's true of a lot of the classes, but with his ability, especially with Honor to the Chapter, to hand out extra action points to the rest of the knights, getting him gear and stuff that gives him plus willpower is just going to be beneficial to everybody else too. And so I would maybe think about prioritizing that over some of your other knights that might need it as well, especially like your Apothecary. Maybe your Apothecary can get along pretty well with fewer will points. Now, he still wants will points too because he's got all of his biomancies and such. But the Justicar, like I said, has that ability, if you skill him into it, to just hand out action points. Here you go, have 2 more, have 3 more, whatever. The rest of the gear and other ideas that you might want to go with kind of depend a lot on how you build him. I had in my playthrough, I had one of my Justicars set up with the Psy Cannon, and he had a suit of armor that basically made it so he didn't suffer range penalties on his ranged weapons. And that was a really nice suit of armor for him and his Psy Cannon. I think it also increased the range, if I remember correctly, on the gun. And so that was a really nice piece for a ranged attacker. Now, if you've got a melee guy, maybe you want the plus speed. If you've got your support guy, you probably want the extra willpower. So those are probably your things. Focus isn't going to be bad for him either, because he is going to have some autos that are going to be good, but I don't know if he's maybe your first choice for your good focus gear. That might potentially go to somebody else, but he can utilize it if you give it to him and you have him skilled into those autos. Giving him the focus is just fine too. If you're going to put resistance gear on anybody, this probably is your guy, since he's very tanky anyway. He's going to have a lot of health, and if you're going for resistances, you're probably going to want to go for extra health points too. And now most Terminator suits that are tier 1 or above actually give extra health too, so that's not as big of a concern necessarily. So I would kind of depend on your build to figure out exactly how you want to kit him out for armor. And I guess that's probably going to be true for a lot of this stuff too, but for a lot of the other gear too, but that's okay. So ranged weapons, he's going to have a storm bolter unless you put him into psi cannons. If you're using psi cannons with your Justicar and with your Purgator, I would give the better psi cannon to your Purgator, because he's going to be able to utilize it a little bit better. He's going to get a little bit more mileage out of it, but you can just even put just a vanilla psi cannon on his arm and he's going to be just fine with it. Otherwise, a decent bolter, you don't have to go with the best bolter that you've got for your Justicar, because your apothecary is probably going to want that, since he's going to be less inclined to get into melee combat. You've got a lot of flexibility and a lot of choices with your Justicar. Even if you don't skill him specifically to be great at melee, he's still good at it. And with Hammer Hand being available very early on, being right off your main circle in your skill tree, it's not a bad idea to get him good at a little bit of both, and he's more dependable with a melee weapon than your apothecary is. So again, your best bolter, probably you're going to want to give that to either your apothecary or maybe one of your like interceptors or something like that. I don't know, it's hard to say. The apothecary in my game always kind of carried the best bolter, because he's, like I said, just less inclined to get into melee combat with his Narthesium not doing quite as much damage as most of the rest of the other weapons. So just give him a regular bolter, or not necessarily your best bolter. If you have a whole bunch of them, your best one probably, like I said, you got it. Good one, not necessarily the best one. And then same thing for the psi cannon. If you're using the psi cannon with the Purgator, give the Purgator the better one, but anything else you want to put on his arm is perfectly fine. For melee weapons, I personally like the Demon Hammer with him, and it's just kind of fitting for him. He's big, he's beefy, he's got this hammer, it does +2 damage on the force strike, and there's a lot of really cool demon hammers that are higher grade. Even if you don't have Destroyer of Chrysalics and you didn't get the pre-order items, there's a lot of decent hammers out there, and there are hammers that help with stunning. If you're going to go for a stun build, an execution build, there's all kinds of stuff. So I like the hammer with him. The force sword is always a good choice because he can parry. The halberd, I'm on the fence with the halberd, because it's only got a 25% chance to do the first strike, which I don't think is the best. And again, you're not probably going to be putting your best focus based gear on him to make that better, and he doesn't have any skills to make that better. So the halberd is a fine weapon. It usually does a lot of damage, but the extra ability on it with the auto first strike isn't necessarily going to come into play that often. And even when it does come into play, it's not that likely to hit. 1 in 4 is probably what you're going to be looking at there. So I like the hammer. I like the force sword. I do like the falchions too, especially if you're going to skill down into the lower left part of the skill tree where you're getting the extra action point for doing crit damages. Falchions have an extra crit % chance, just base, and the upgraded falchions are even better potentially. And so that's a good choice if you're going for crits. So that would be my 3 ideas, I think, for him. Hammer most of the time, falchions if you want crits, or force sword if you're kind of wanting him to be a little bit more defensive and have a chance to parry. So those are kind of my ideas there. War gear slot's going to depend a lot, and I mean a lot, on how you build out your knight with his skill trees. Servo skulls, you can never go wrong with the Medicae skull. Having the extra healing ability along is always great. This particular guy gets the extra grenade. He gets the +2, 2 of 2 ammo here, so that's not a bad choice for him, but it's just a choice for him because that's his personal skill. Without that, I wouldn't probably put grenades on him, because he's big and tanky. He's less likely to need to knock somebody back or knock somebody off a position, because he can just soak most of the damage, even if he's being overwatched or whatever. If you get his Aegis shield buffed up a little bit, he's probably going to be able to just soak it without having to waste his war gear slot on a grenade that he's going to be able to use once, let's say. in this particular knight's case, again, it makes some sense because he gets 2, and even at this point I might be looking for armor for him that adds extra ammo for grenades and extra range or extra damage or whatever too. You could go all in on that. Now, is it the best thing to do? I don't know, probably not, but you could. It's a choice, right? And having grenades is always good, so there's that. The other thing that's going to depend on is whether or not you get down into the onto the chapters tree and get the extra war gear slot, because then you've got a lot more flexibility. In that case, you have the passive war gear slot. You can put in, you can put in the incense burner for the extra will points. If you have the Domina Liber Demonica, you can give him that for extra crit. You've got, you're going to pick up other stuff along the way too. As you finish missions, you're going to get all kinds of different war gear. You're going to get stuff that increases your ammo capacity. You're going to get stuff that increases your armor. You're going to get stuff that increases hit points. All kinds of stuff. You're going to get different types of skulls too, servo skulls. You're going to get your whalers, you're going to get your extractor skulls, you're going to get your disruptor skulls, whatever. So having that extra slot really gives you that flexibility to have the incense burner, which I don't think is a bad choice even if you have just one war gear slot, right? I think it's a decent choice even without that extra thing, because he does want the willpower. But if you can have that, then you can also carry a skull with you and whatnot, and you don't have to worry about it. So this is a solid choice anyway. Like I said, a Medicae skull is a solid choice as well for him. If you have the extra war gear slot, I would go with the incense burner in that almost definitely, because again, the extra willpower is great for him, and it doesn't cost the rest of the unit anything to let him have that. You're not giving up a suit of armor for it, for instance. So that's kind of my thoughts, I guess, on kitting this guy out. Again, it's going to depend a lot on how you build him. If he's not built for support, maybe he doesn't need that extra willpower, and you can focus more on things that give him extra armor, extra ammo, whatever. Depends on how he's kitted out. So how does the rest of the group help him out? A lot of the normal stuff, I guess you could say. He wants to get into melee in a lot of cases. If you're not specifically building him out for using the Psy Cannon, his more comfortable place, I think, is in melee than at range. Now, that's not to say he's not going to be using that bolter, because he is. But if he can get into melee, generally he can mix it up in there. He can tie people up, and if they attack him, well, all the better, because he's the guy that's most suited to tank the damage. And so you get in there, you mix it up. They attack your Justicar, which means they're not hitting your guys that are squishier in their power armor, and all is well with the world. How you help him out in other regards. He loves biomancies. He likes to get warp speed, the warp speed charge, the warp speed biomancy that increases his speed and crit damage. He likes to get the iron arm biomancy that increases his stun attacks and the amount of stun that he does with his melee attacks. Generally speaking, when I was going executioner, I used a Justicar for that a lot, along with a apothecary, to kind of capitalize on getting the extra action point, with the apothecary's litany that allows that. That's going to be where most of your help is going to come from in most cases anyway. But this guy really does like the warp speed biomancy. He's not particularly fast, generally speaking. Getting that extra +2 speed on him isn't going to hurt you at all. Extra crit damage with his melee weapons, also not a bad thing. The thing you're going to run into with this guy that I found anyway, is he doesn't have any way around the Pox Demon's parry ability, where your Interceptor can't be parried. So the Interceptor is slightly better at melee than this guy is. The Purgator is slightly better at heavy weapons combat than this guy is. But this guy is solid at both, right? And so if you do things right, you can kind of avoid, you can get some disruptions off to stop the parry or whatever, and he can do just fine in either role. So that's kind of my thoughts on the Justicar and how you can kind of help him out, how he can help your squad out. He's there to be an all-arounder and a tank, I think. Handing out extra action points is a great plus. You're going to probably want the Honor the Chapter ability on most of your builds, I would imagine, just because it adds so much flexibility to your squad. I used a Justicar all through my campaign, even when I had the higher level. I actually like the Justicar slightly better than I like the Paladin, which is the advanced version of the Justicar. Now the Paladin, I'm going to do a video on the Paladin too. He's got his own pluses and minuses, but I found the Justicar to be more flexible. So I think that's going to do it for this video, though. I've expounded enough on this class. I think they're solid, flexible, can build them out in a lot of different directions, and they're going to do well at any of those things. So pick them up, love them, use them. And if you've enjoyed this video, do me a big favor, hit that like button for me. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button too, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.